Good evening, everyone. It is May 11th. This is Victory Loves Company. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm still getting used to this new time slot. I am James Lynch. He is Jim West. Jim, how are you today? How's everything?
Doing great. It's just hotter than hell in this office. For whatever reason, in our gym, this is the only office and the only space that the damn air won't come into. So I'm gonna make weight here in about 5 minutes.
You can't invest in a fan or anything, or what?
I did, but it broke.
Oh, gotcha. Well, maybe you need a new fan. We got to get Amanda to hook you up or something. Maybe help us out here. Anyways, thanks so much for tuning in. Again, we're a little bit late today. I had an interview that actually didn't even end up happening. I had to reschedule that as well. So apologies for being a little bit late. No guest today. There's a lot to talk about. We had a guest sort of lined up, but we had to reschedule that. So we got a ton to get into. But first, just want to remind our audience, if you are watching this live or you're watching the replay, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We're always looking to grow the channel and, keep this show coming every single week. But our new time slot will be 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time, just to remind people as well. Jim, how was your weekend? What'd you get up to?
What did I do this weekend? Did the Mother's Day thing.
Okay.
My sister and I took we did more on Saturday because Sunday is just stupid. You know, you can't get in anywhere. You have a 5-hour wait for anywhere you want to go eat. So we decided that we're going to take my mom out on Saturday. So we went to breakfast, me, my mom, my daughter, my sister, to breakfast, bought her a bunch of stuff and hung out for a little bit. And then Sunday I actually went up to Aspen's and we went hiking at some lake way up 7,000 feet. It was actually pleasant. I didn't die this time. So it was good. It's a good weekend. I got a little tan. So
I can see. Yeah, that's great. We did a brunch at my grandparents' place. We're all safe because we're all kind of in the same bubble in case anyone's wondering. But it was great. It was basically me and my father-in-law. We basically cooked a bit, and everyone had a good feast. And then what did I do the rest of the day? I think I had an interview, and I had a few other things to do, just sort of errands and stuff. But good weekend nonetheless. But we had some fights over the weekend. We had Bellator last week. We had PFL. I wanted to start with the UFC card first. The main event was I was going to say Michelle Rodriguez. That's an actress. It's Marina Rodriguez taking on Michelle Waterson, the battle of two strawweights fighting at flyweight. I thought a great performance by Marina. She just looks so much bigger than Michelle. I don't know how you felt watching the fight, but what did you think of that matchup with Rodriguez getting the decision?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like what we talked about and kind of what I had thought. I did think Michelle was going to win, but I did think it was going to be a decision one way or another. She used her length well, used the clinch well. I will say the one thing that we did talk about is Marina's ground game off her back is really bad. And remember, I had mentioned, I said, if Michelle gets her down one time, it could be bad quick. And she was controlled very easily. So there's a very big glaring hole there. But nonetheless, she did well. She was able to utilize her range and clinch opportunities against the cage, etc. So that was a great win. I'm curious to see who she's going to get next and what Michelle's.
That's the weird thing, right? Because this happened at flyweight. It's two strawweights. I mean, I get them doing it at 125. I'm sure it was on Marina's end where she didn't want to cut that much weight. It's a short notice fight. I think they were supposed to fight in June, right? So they moved it up. So I would imagine this still sort of counts as a strawweight, like they're her placing at strawweight.
Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah. There should be some options for. I still think you could do Rodriguez and Ioana and Jacek just because who's Ioana and Jacek going to fight? She can't fight the title holder, right? Because Rose has beat her twice. You can't. That's a tough argument to make for her fighting for the title.
Weili beat her, of course, right?
You could do the Weili rematch if they wanted to, Ioana and Weili, if you wanted to go that route. But I think Marina Rodriguez has earned it, unless you go Rodriguez, Mackenzie Dern. I'm not sure. They're sort of all in that mix, right? So
yeah, that's going to be a bad one. That could be a bad potential matchup for Marina, right? Like
Yeah, because Dern's great on the ground.
And
stand-up's really improved too.
I like the Jacek fight though, and Marina. I actually think Marina beats her, but we'll see. But I'm curious to see what happens to Michelle. You get so many of these athletes. I'm not saying she's done because by no stretch is she. I don't think. But I'm curious on what's going to happen, right? I mean, she's made that ascent. She's ascended up to close to the top several times now, and then now back down on the descent. And how many more times is that going to happen, right? Like, I don't know.
Well, I think it could be also a situation where maybe she's just praying that an atomweight division comes in, because if she was at atomweight, she'd probably be the champion, or at least a title contender or something in that way. Because here's the thing, you see the skill set of Michelle, like you saw that in that fourth round. She's very good. I mean, on paper, Michelle's probably a better fighter than Marion Rodriguez. Just she's too small, and she's going to keep running into these issues when she's fighting fighters that are big for the weight class. That's just sort of my assessment of it. Like, Michelle's a great fighter, and maybe she'll continue to get some notable wins in the division, but I don't think she'll ever be a champion for that exact reason. There's just too many bigger fighters. So.
Yeah, it's rough. I don't know. I'm curious to see what happens. I like Michelle. She's very talented, but you know how the UFC works, especially when you start getting into your mid 30s, right. and you've made that ascent several times and haven't gotten it, and now you lose. We've seen this over and over again.
Yeah, no, we certainly have. We got a couple comments in the chat there. Chase Jackson saying howdy from Arkansas. We got Dino in the chat saying hello to both of us and to Amanda as well. So always great for people chiming in. If you guys have any questions, this will be kind of like a Q&A as well. We're doing a bit of a shorter show here today, but if you guys have any questions, or girls, definitely post them here. We'll get to them when we can. The other fight I wanted to talk about on this card, there's actually two more I wanted to talk about. Alex Morono knocking out Donald Cerrone. Great opportunity there for Morono, bouncing back from that loss to Anthony Pettis, finishing Cowboy in the first round. I was very impressed with Morono in this fight.
Were we surprised?
Cerrone was actually, I think he was the betting favorite.
Yeah, but James, were we surprised?
No, we weren't. No.
This was not a surprise. Donald Cerrone, he's awesome, but he should have retired 3 years ago. Like, let's just be honest. Yeah, did Morono do well? Of course he did, but he should have done well against a very weathered Donald Cerrone.
Yeah. Is that it for Cowboy? Do you want to see him fight again? It seems like they are going to give him another fight.
It looks like Dana's going to give him one more at 155 so he can try to go out, on top. Mm-hmm. But that's going to be his last one. I mean, really, he should have been done probably 2 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. Roughly.
Yeah.
Because now I'm just starting to feel bad. Like, it's like, man, we've talked about this on other shows too, James. It's like, it sucks as an athlete, regardless of the sport. Like, Father Time catches up to us all, and some refuse to let that reality kind of sink in. And this is one of those stories again. Like, he could have went out on top, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, when he was kind of really, really up there, right? He had won some fights. He was looking good, and now look where we're at. I mean, he's taken a lot of damage in the last couple of years, and unnecessary at that. He's made plenty of money. I understand. I know it's hard as an athlete, but man, you got to know. And yeah, and so I was not surprised, and good for Alex Morono. It's a big win, of course, or a big name.
Yeah, no, it was good on the resume. The only other thing I wanted to talk about on this card, there were a couple nice performances. I thought Neil Magny had a really good game plan against Jeff Neal, keeping him at bay. Neil, I think, and he sort of talked about it post-fight, I think he's still got some health issues. He just doesn't look as fast as he's been prior to him having that health scare last year. Granted, he's fighting two really good guys in Wonderboy Thompson, Neil Magny, but I felt like Neil looked a little bit slow in this one, and credit to Neil Magny for taking advantage of that. What did you think of that fight?
Yeah, I mean, Neil did a great job because, Jeff does he's very good at covering as he comes in, and then once he gets in, throwing that right hook, left hand, and every time he'd get in, Neil would kind of clinch him up, kind of lock him down a little bit, and kind of take some of those things away. And but Neil's known for doing that. His conditioning's fantastic. He's not going to get tired. He was able to mix it in, keep him at range when he wanted to. I don't know if it was, it has anything to do with Jeff's health. I hope it doesn't, for him. I'd rather believe it was just, Neil had a better approach, had better conditioning, and was able to neutralize some of the things that Jeff likes to do.
Before we move along to UFC 262 and some other news we got to talk about, did you see the PFL main event with Ferreira and Verdum? I was curious your thoughts. They ended up changing it to a no contest. So if you haven't seen the fight, basically Verdum ended up losing by TKO, but they showed the replay. Ferreira definitely tapped. Did you catch all this? Did you happen to catch the highlights of that? I
saw the highlights, and I think it was today or yesterday that they changed it over to a no contest.
Yeah, which doesn't happen too often. So credit to Verdum.
It was a clear tap.
Yeah, it was. Here's my problem though, Jim, and I'm curious to get a coach's perspective on this. If Verdum was really out, if Verdum really thought that he had tapped, I mean, he did tap, but kind of my issue is he was saying that I wasn't fighting back. he still was in the triangle cold, and you didn't hear him tell the ref that he had tapped. I found that a bit weird. It's almost as though he was almost using it as a defense after the fact. I mean, again, he tapped. I'm not denying that, but I did find that a little bit odd. Don't you think? If he's on his back, you can see the guy tap. The ref is still letting him punch. Wouldn't you say tap? He's tapping. He's tapping. No different than if someone gets in a guillotine choke or something and you tell the ref he's out. I'm surprised that didn't happen.
Yeah, well, no, I agree 100%. And I didn't see the fight, so I don't know. Obviously, the guy got out of the triangle at some point, or did the round end or something?
No, basically, he was still in the triangle, but he was able to land shots. Okay. And so that's what ended up knocking out Verdum. But that's where it's like, that's where I didn't Verdum's like, that's why I didn't fight back. And it's like, well, okay, then why were you still in the hold? And why did you not tell the referee? So I felt like that was something that I feel like a lot of the media and everyone sort of glanced over, is like, I'm pretty sure, again, if you think that you've won the fight by submission, why are you not telling the referee he's out or whatever?
No, you would definitely, usually you do, right? You say something.
So I thought that was a bit odd as well. Also, what came out last week, we mentioned Cowboy Cerrone. He was supposed to fight Diego Sanchez. Sanchez gets fired from the UFC. I'm sure you've seen some of the video with his coach, Joshua Fabia, however you want to call it. Unfortunate way to end his career. But now we're hearing all this stuff where it's just like Diego's the talk of the town right now, not in a good way. We're hearing now that, he's making accusations towards Dana White about, certain things that he's done with fighters. Don't need to go there. You guys can Google it. There's all this stuff now about, them trying to get medical records. Like, what do you make of this as a coach? Have you ever been in a situation where you've seen sort of another coach try and sort of, manipulate a fighter in a way? I mean, that's kind of what it looks like. I'm sure you saw some of the training footage too with Diego hanging upside down.
I saw him hanging upside down like a bat, getting kicked in the head and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know. No, fortunately, thank God, I've never been part of anything like that or seen it. I don't have anything bad to say because I don't know the Fabia guy, but what I see on social media, like everyone else, it definitely raises some eyebrows for sure. I mean, it's very odd. I think Diego has some issues, whether or not Diego or Fabia has any kind of, dirt on Dana or what have you. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But I don't know. It's very odd, to say the least.
It's very, and it's just unfortunate. Like I said, Diego was the original Ultimate Fighter. He was one of the last men. He was the last man standing from that cast, but one of the longest serving UFC fighters. For him to get fired over this whole thing, and it's just, it's unfortunate. And here's the other thing, like, so I mentioned this last week, I think, to you, that I interviewed Diego, and then all of a sudden the fight's off, and I was like, why did that happen? And then you see this stuff behind the scenes. But now, like, because I had to go get the interview through Joshua Fabia, I did, message him, and that's how I set up the interview initially. Well, now him and Diego are DMing me all these videos of them exposing the UFC. I'm assuming for me to post it and kind of take their side, but I'm just staying out of it. Like, I want nothing to do with this. It's the whole thing, whether you believe it or not, whatever. It's just the whole thing's bad. Like, you're not going to win against the UFC. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what they're trying to prove. Like,
the odds aren't good.
No,
that's for sure.
No. So I don't know. We'll see what happens there, but obviously some bizarre stuff. But that's, everything I've seen this last week has been Diego Sanchez this and all this crazy stuff, not in a good way, like we mentioned as well. The other thing that happened last week that I don't know if a lot of people know, and I messaged you right away when I saw this, looks like Macy Barber's doing a bit of training at Team Alpha Male. And the only reason I noted that is because I saw on her Instagram, she's posting a photo in Sacramento. So I messaged you right away and I said, hey, have you heard anything? Because you train with Uriah, or Uriah.
Yeah, no, I think she must be in town training down there. Yeah, I don't know, but I haven't spoke to her. I haven't spoke to Uriah either. I just saw.
We're one step closer to Macy maybe training at MMA Gold. We'll see that she's close by, right?
Yeah, she's more than welcome to come in. I mean, there's plenty of girls in here to train with. You have Olympic boxers and Sammy Kinchin. You have Aspen Ladd, Marion, Reneau. I mean, there's all kinds of them. So if she chooses to, she's always more than welcome to.
Yeah. No, we're interested to see what happens there. Trying to get an interview with Macy. Haven't heard anything back, so we'll see. Maybe she's not doing much media leading into this fight. Actually, I'll tell you who else I reached out to today. Your other favorite fighter, Juliana Pena. So we'll see if I can end up getting something with her as well. We'll see.
Yeah, whatever.
We'll see. We do have a big UFC card coming up here this weekend. UFC 262, Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler. Of course, you're going to be there because you're going to be cornering Andrea Lee. I was talking to her this week. How's Andrea looking heading into this fight?
No, she's great. She just left. She just got to Houston today. I think at about 3:30 or 4. She had just texted me, when are you coming in? I get in there tomorrow at 1:30.
Oh, good timing. That's the
So yeah, no, she's great, happy. Andrea's probably the best weight cutter ever. So fight week is easy for Andrea. Well, at least she makes it look easy. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, she's good. She's in good spirits, healthy, physically and mentally. should be a good showing for her.
I asked her this in the interview I did on my podcast the other day with Kendrick Johnson. Did Caitlin Chukagian kind of show the blueprint of how to beat Antonina? You take her down. Obviously, the ground game is not her forte. Obviously, I'm not going to, reveal any secrets here, but is that something you're looking at where you're like, hey, Caitlin had a relatively easy time doing that? I'm sure that's something you're looking at as well in this fight.
Yeah, I mean, you see those things, as a coach. Really what you're looking for is tendencies of the fighter, not necessarily, yes, you see the Caitlin Chukagian fights and kind of what she did. You see those things, but it's really more of I would say 90% of what you're looking at is the tendencies of the athlete that you're fighting, and then some of those things that the other athletes may have been successful at utilizing. Yeah, I mean, Andrea is very good all around. She should be able to use all those aspects of MMA, and it should be a good showing for her. And
back against the wall, I mean, let's call it what it is. She's got 3 straight losses. Granted, a lot of good fighters in there. Joanne Calderwood, Lauren Murphy, they're both fighting each other, potentially number 1 contenders fight. And you got Roxanne, who's still a pretty crafty veteran. So it's kind of interesting there. And Antonina, if you look at her career, it's win-loss, win-loss, right? So she's coming off a win. According to the data anyways, it looks like she's supposed to lose this next one. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, Andrea's, she came into the UFC, won 3 in a row, and then lost 3 in a row. And let's be honest, the last 3 that she's lost were very close. I mean, you have 2 split decisions and a majority decision, so it's very close against elite athletes. And now she gets a chance to go back up and get her 4th win in the UFC on Saturday. So I'm looking forward to it.
The other fight I want to talk about on this card, we might as well talk a bit about the main card here. Shane Burgos and Edson Barbosa. What an awesome fight that is. If that's not fight of the night.
Definitely could be, man. Definitely could be.
I had a chance to speak to both fighters ahead of this one. Burgos, obviously, interested to get, dying to get back in there. He was supposed to fight Hakeem Dawodu. Dawodu's injured. He now gets Edson Barbosa, a much better opponent, in terms of name value and all that. For Barbosa, I thought he beat Dan Ige a couple fights ago. He's at 45, again, I think it's a new, sort of life for him there because he's lost a few at 155. How do you look at this fight? Because they're both great strikers. I'd say Edson probably has the edge in the technique in terms of his striking, but what are you looking at? What are you expecting from this fight?
A lot of leg kicks.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of leg kicks by Edson. I think if Edson can just keep his distance and keep his range utilizing those leg kicks, and I think he could beat, Shane. I'm not going to say easy, but he should have the advantage in that aspect. And I don't know if Shane's going to change up what he typically does. I don't know if his stripes on the zebra is going to change on Saturday, but he may have to. But we'll see. I think Edson's going to edge it out with speed and precision.
Yeah.
I think that's my guess. We'll see. I'll be there.
I think it's a toss-up fight. I did go with Edson in this one just because I do think he's a tiny bit better in the striking department. I do see that's where it's standing. But here's the thing. I don't think we'll see a finish. It's a 3-round fight. Both guys pretty durable. If you look at Burgos, when he has been finished, typically later in the fight. I don't know if that will occur here. Barbosa, also very tough to finish as well. So we'll see if that ends up happening. That's one to keep an eye on as well. We've got that Caitlin Chukagian and Viviane Araujo fight. I'm sure you're paying attention to that for Andrea. I like Caitlin in that fight. I think, a lot of fans don't like Caitlin because of some of her comments about saying how she does not trying to be entertaining. And, there's some other stuff as well, but she's pretty good. She's got some good wins. If you look at her resume and even her losses, for the most part, outside of Valentina, they've been close decisions. So what are you expecting in this fight? I think it's a good test.
Yeah, Viviane's super fast.
Yeah.
She's got very athletic. I think you're going to see what the fans would call boring, right? By Caitlin, but a win is a win, right? And I think if Caitlin does that, I think she will win. I think it'll be a decision. I don't think she's going to engage much, and allow Viviane to kind of get inside. We'll see. But I'm going to go with Caitlin on this, and I think it'll be a decision.
Yeah, Caitlin decision. No, surprises there. Okay, co-main event. I'm very interested by that. By the way, this card took a bunch of hits, right? Supposed to have Leon Edwards, Nate Diaz. That gets moved to UFC 263. We found out this week Edmund Shabazian and Jack Hermanson has been moved to the May. I think it's May 22nd is when that's been moved as well. By the way, I like Jack in that fight all day. I don't know why. This is something actually. I'll kind of take a little sidestep here on that fight. I don't understand the matchmaking there, and let me explain why. Same sort of thing when we talked about Macy a little while back on the show, is you've spent all this time building out Edmund Shabazian, right? And then he fights Derek Brunson and he loses. and he loses decisively. I mean, it was a pretty one after that first round, it was all Derek Brunson. Now you're giving him Jack Hermanson, which I get, rankings wise, it makes sense, but you put all this time in building this guy up. You don't want to give him a bit of a layup, because Jack Hermanson's not a layup for anyone. Just ask Calvin Gastelum. I find that matchmaking a little odd, in my opinion.
Yeah, sometimes I have to do this when I see stuff like that, because, there's roughly 85 or 86 middleweights contracted in the UFC. I have to think there's a better option for someone that is 21 or 22 years old that has a bright future, right? Like, I don't know. I'm scratching my head with you, because it could be a very quick night, especially if Hermanson decides to put Edmund on his back. Yeah,
it is interesting, because we know that Edmund could rush Hermanson and knock him out like Jared Cannonier did. It's possible, but yeah, I wonder. And then the other thing is, I don't know if I've ever asked you this. Have you ever interacted at all with Edmund Tarvinian? That's his coach, Ronda Rousey's old coach. I know he's a little bit unconventional, but that's where he trains. And I do wonder at some point if that's going to catch up to him, because there was that curse for a while. Remember, Travis Brown went to that gym, Jake Ellenberg. There's a few other fighters that went there and they didn't have much success, right? So there's part of that too.
Yeah, I mean, I hope not. I don't see that for especially a kid that's got so much potential. But
Edmund's good. Like, people talked about him being rushed in the Brunson fight. I don't think so. He head kicked Brad Tavares at that New York card. Remember the Masvidal and Diaz card? And I remember thinking, like, this guy looks legit. And then,
but those are things. You know what I mean? Those are things. Those are fights. But you have to look at the big picture of things. Like, the kid's age, what they're trying to do. Are they? You know what I mean? Like, just because he kicked Brad in the head and knocked him out, I mean, that's okay, great. But that doesn't mean that you continually give him the top flight guys. I get his range.
But but to be fair, at the time, Brunson wasn't really having this resurgence in his career. I think at the time he had lost a couple fights in a row. I mean, I think he might have come off the win over Heinisch, I think, in the fight leading into it. But at the time, we didn't know how good Brunson was. We know Brunson's good now. I mean, he's turned things around, right? But I think at the time, I think it was a fair fight, because I think you could have said at that point, Brunson was probably somewhat of a gatekeeper. If you're beating the guys you're supposed to be decisively, I think him fighting a gatekeeper was not a big deal. I think now this is where they're making a mistake. You're giving him Hermanson. Hermanson, last time I checked, had he fought Till, and I think he would have won that maybe, he probably would have been fighting for a title. So now you're giving him a guy who's almost close to a title shot. It doesn't make any sense. So
yeah, I think it's going to be rough. If it hits the mat, it's going to be rough for Edmund, I think.
That's what I think so too. So yeah, let's talk about the co-main event here. As we go back to UFC 262, Tony Ferguson, Beneil Dariush, a case of two fighters going in opposite directions, right? Ferguson losing back-to-back fights against two of the best in the division in Justin Gaethje and Charles Oliveira. Last time I checked, Oliveira's fighting for a title. Gaethje was a former interim champ. And you got a guy in Beneil Dariush who's really turned things around since losing to Alex Hernandez. He's coming off a couple nice stoppage wins. He just got a win over Diego Ferreira. That's what's earned him to the shot. Who are you liking in this one? Because it's really interesting.
It is. I think it goes what we talked about earlier, like relative to Donald Cerrone, is father time and damage caught up to Tony Ferguson? I don't know. That's the question. And I think Beneil has enough in his gas tank and enough in his arsenal to expose that. So I don't know. I'm going to pick Benny in this, and I think it's going to be for those reasons.
This reminds me a lot of Tyron Woodley, does it not? Similar thing, right? Yeah. In the Woodley's case, a former champion, Ferguson right on the cusp of being a champion. Same age, I think Ferguson's about 37. Had some layoffs, had some injuries, and now you're fighting an up and comer, kind of like Woodley with Luque. You hope Ferguson's got enough left to beat a Beneil Dariush, but I just don't see that happening at this point. I think if you're looking at it, typically when a fighter's older and they've had injuries, it doesn't usually go well unless you're like Jan Blachowicz, but he's sort of the exception to the rule, right? A lot of these guys, when they get older and they're taking a lot of damage, how much damage has Beneil Dariush taken outside of a couple knockout losses in his career? Outside of that, he's been pretty, good.
Yeah, the Alexander Hernandez thing, which was so quick when he got, I think it was,
Hernandez had nothing to lose in that fight. It was his debut, and you've seen the catalyst with Beneil Dariush. If you're a power puncher, you rush him right away. You could probably take him out, maybe. And that worked out for Hernandez. So I'm with you there. We're both on the same page there. Yeah, we're both on Dariush. Okay, main event. I'm curious to get your picks here. Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler. Charles Oliveira, from what I've been seeing all week, just a slight favorite. It's a close fight. Chandler, I don't think I've seen him at plus money, but I think I've seen him, close to that or whatever. But who are you liking here in the main event for the vacant lightweight title?
I'm going to pick Oliveira. I think his ability to clinch. Oftentimes people forget that a good clinch is a good takedown defense at times, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's good in there. And I think his jiu-jitsu is very MMA centric, and I think he utilizes it in that way very well. And I think for those reasons, he has an advantage. I think, the explosiveness and things like that, I think Chandler has. But I think those two areas lend, Charles to be. I mean, granted, he's probably a better striker. He's more of a Muay Thai, very rhythmic type guy. But I think those two areas that I mentioned, the clinch kind of game and that MMA-centric grappling that he has and his ability to snatch things very quick and transition from submission to submission. He's not just laying there, right? Like he's constantly either trying to get up or he's throwing something very consistent. It's keeping you on guard the whole time. So I think for those reasons, I'm going to go with Charles. I think he submits Michael Chandler in the later rounds.
I'm with Oliveira as well. My thinking is, look, there's been some debate about, Chandler, whether he deserves a shot or not. I mean, you got an A+ performance in your debut. I mean, you don't see Dan Hooker getting knocked out that early from a lot of fighters, right? I mean, we've seen Hooker finish, but not that quickly. Yeah. So Chandler, kudos to him. He did everything he needed to do in his debut. He deserves a shot.
Yeah.
But here's the thing with Chandler that I think a lot of people are kind of overlooking here is that he has lost, and it's not, you could talk about the Brent Primus thing. That's fine. We don't need to count that because that was an injury. But he did get knocked out by Pitbull, right? Yeah. And Pitbull's great, and I'm not, trying to discredit him at all, but he did get knocked out by Pitbull a couple of years ago, and I know it was a couple of years ago. That Will Brooks fight, if you remember that fight where Will Brooks basically was hitting Chandler, and Chandler does one of these. Do you remember that?
Remember that fight? I don't remember it. I don't.
And the ref called it because Chandler felt like it was like his body saying, I'm taking too much damage. I got to go out. That sort of stuck with me. And I know Chandler's evolved since then, and he's at a great camp, and, he certainly looked great. But I do look at the resume, and I look at guys like Sidney Outlaw and Benson Henderson that he's fought recently, and I just think that, like, Oliveira is so much better than those guys, right? And I think, to some degree, I think that it could be a case of where maybe we're not looking at the overall opposition. Here's the thing with Oliveira too, Jim. And remember when he came in the UFC, he had some struggles. Remember Jim Miller submitting him? You remember, he's been in the UFC for a while, but he figured it out. He got in the right weight class. Remember, he kept trying to go to featherweight. He had these bad weight cuts and all this stuff. He's finally at 55 now. He's finally getting in his groove. And here's the thing I like the most is that he's beating guys dominantly. Kevin Lee. Here's Kevin Lee, who, I still think Kevin Lee's a good fighter, but to go out there and outstrike Kevin Lee and show off your boxing and show off that area of your game and go out there and outclass a guy in Kevin Lee, I thought that was impressive. And Tony Ferguson, I mean, he almost ripped Ferguson's arm off in that first round. Like, if Tony wasn't so tough, it's probably a first round finish for 90% of the roster. I just think Oliveira is just, he's just at the prime right now of his career. And I think even if Chandler does land a bomb, I think Oliveira survives. I think the last stoppage loss he had was against Felder a couple of years ago, Paul Felder. Yeah,
I don't see, Chandler likes to use what we call as like a run. So he'll start right-handed and he'll switch into left hand where he's switching you into his power, right? Yeah. But I don't see him, tricking Oliveira with that. I think he got Dan Hooker in the right kind of right moment at that, and it probably won't happen again, right? Like he got him going straight back. He caught him floating to one side, so he did his run from the right to the left through the big overhand left and caught him, right, going straight back. I just don't see things like that happening against Charles Oliveira.
Yeah, same here. And I think, like I said, even if he does take a Chandler shot, I think he survives. I think he, that veteran experience, there's something to be said for that. This guy's been in the UFC. I'm going to go look it up here. He's been in the UFC, I want to say, since like 2010. I feel like it's been that long. He made his debut. Let me look here. He made his UFC debut in 2010. Exactly. It was August of 2010. So think about that. That's
almost 11 years. Yeah.
That's crazy. And the fact that he's been able to turn it, I mean, how many guys have we seen go in the UFC, get a couple losses in the route? He's stuck around. And I think,
and how old is he? He's not that old, I don't think.
31, I think.
Yeah.
31.
So he's still right there in his prime.
And you look at, and again, I just want to bring up the resume one more time before we sort of move on here, but you look at this, Donald Cerrone, Cub Swanson, Frankie Edgar, Jeremy Stevens, Max Holloway, Anthony Pettis, Ricardo Lamas. He's got a win over Will Brooks, who defeated Chandler. We'll forget about that. It was 2017. Yeah. Paul Felder. He lost to Felder, but he still fought him. Kevin Lee, like I mentioned. Like, these are all good opposition that I just don't think Chandler's, outside of Hooker, maybe Eddie Alvarez is his best win. And even then, that was a close fight back in the day. So, I like Oliveira here. I do see it being a competitive fight, but I do think that Oliveira will go out there and win. And probably to the, probably to the UFC, which is not what they want. They want Chandler to be champ. He's easy to market. Oliveira, 10 years in the sport, still can't speak a ton of English, and that's not easy to market, right? So there's that side of it as well. But yeah, I think Oliveira will get it done there. In terms of the implications of this fight as well, there's a couple different ways they could go with this. You've still got Gaethje sort of waiting in the wings. I think Gaethje, due to the circumstances, I'm not a fan of fighters getting a title shot off a loss, but in this case, the guy he lost to's retired. I don't have an issue with that, unless Poirier wants to fight for the belt. But I don't think I think Poirier's kind of. I have this. Yeah, I think it's about the money for him at this point. It's not about
absolutely.
And good for him. I think he beats Conor, and I think maybe that's it, or maybe he does get another sort of money fight. But
he might sail off in the sunset. I mean, there is no fight out there that's going to pay him Conor money.
I think a Nate Diaz fight might be a little close if we're talking. I mean, Diaz is a welterweight. I don't know if he'll ever fight at 155 again, but that's maybe the only one that would come
maybe.
close.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. But if he goes and beats Conor again, you're talking about a serious dough twice in a row. You know what I mean? I don't think he's fighting. He's fighting now to just cement his legacy and make money.
Yeah, as he should be. He's given a lot to the sport. Why not get some money out of it as well? So I think that's sort of what's next. Is maybe Gaethje, or just looking at the rankings. No one really stands out. So I think that's sort of where they're going to go with that. Some other news: Angela Hill. I don't know if you saw, she was off last week's card. It looks
going
like
back, right? June 5th or something.
Yeah, June 5th. She's going to be fighting Amanda Ribas. I like that fight. I think that's an interesting matchup for both fighters. Ribas coming off the loss to Marina Rodriguez. Angela Hill's been kind of up or down. This is usually what happens with Angela Hill. Either she wins like a really close fight or she loses a close fight. So we'll see if Ribas can take advantage of that, right? So,
yeah, I think actually Angela's going to win. She's very shifty on her feet, and she's got very good takedown defense. I'm not saying that I want her to win one way or another. I don't really care, but I think she's going to pull this one out.
I'll go the other way on that one. And when that fight comes about, we can talk about that. Some other news. I don't know if you caught this today. Anthony Johnson, the Bellator fighter, arrested after his Bellator debut win for an alleged 2019 use of a stolen credit card. What are you doing, dude? You've got enough money. Like, why you? I don't know. It seems like this always, like, there's always something with Anthony Johnson with outside of this.
Oftentimes, the sport is interesting.
Yes,
and breeds.
Oh, did we lose Jim there? At least he didn't end up on like a bad screenshot, right? At least Jim's like kind of, at least he's like somewhat smiling there. Could be a lot worse if Jim was not there. So I think we lost Jim here, but that's okay. I can carry the show for a little bit longer. We only got about 15 minutes left. If anyone is watching this live, make sure you send a question. I can answer it while Jim stays in the frozen face here. It's kind of interesting there. So no, Jim just he's speechless. He just after I said something interesting, he just he was taken aback by everything there. So there we go. Oh, we got Jim back. I think. Is he there? Just see black Jim. Black screen with Jim. Anyways, I'll keep rambling on here. What else we got going on in the world of MMA right now? We've got some other fight announcements that have happened. I didn't even mention this. Sean Soriano going to be back in the UFC this weekend. That'll be interesting. He had a tough go, his first go around with the UFC. He fought at featherweight. He's won a couple fights since, so he's back in. He's actually going to take on Chris Giagos on the prelims this weekend. Pretty solid card. By the way, I will be doing a live stream on Saturday night. So if you guys want to, if you guys are watching the pay-per-view and you're near your laptop, come join the live stream on Saturday night on my channel. That's youtube.com/LynchOnSports. Myself and John Coe will be doing basically commentary and reacting to all the fights as they go along. All things considered, with some of the switch ups, it's still a decent pay-per-view. I mean, Ferguson and Dariush as a co-main event is great. The title fight's going to be awesome, and some good fights in the prelims. Like, we didn't even mention Jacare Souza is on the prelims of this UFC 262 pay-per-view. So just goes to show how stacked the card is overall as well. What else do we got here on the docket in terms of other stuff? Eric Anders and Darren Stewart rematch booked for UFC 263. That was the one that ended in a bit of a controversy there as well. Cowboy Fight Picks says, odd to see you here, James. I love your work. Well, I do the show every week with Jim. We usually just do it earlier in the morning, but we've switched our time to 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time. So a little bit easier for you guys to tune in. I know a lot of you are not early risers like I am, but I have to be early riser, right? I'm a dad. I got to be up. I got to do all that stuff as well. So again, if you guys have any questions, keep them coming here. But I'm the king of keeping it going here. I did a mention as well, like I said, Anders and Stewart rebooked. That's going to be good here. I'm just looking. Oh, Alan Joban retired. I forgot to mention that as well. Tried to get an interview with Alan Joban. I'll mention this, but he apparently did like 4 interviews today, and he's like, look, man, like I'd love to do an interview, but it's going to be kind of stale at this point. I've kind of said the same thing, and I agree. It's all good. So I think I'll be talking to Alan in a few weeks here once the dust has settled a little bit, but good for Alan. Does a great job. He had the podcast with Karen Bryant. He's done some work on the desk. He'll be fine. He's got a lot going for him right now, and I think he's one of those guys that anything he does, he's going to be very, very solid in what he does going forward. But I think it was time. How old is he? I want to say he's 37 at this point, which is not too old, but at the same time, like it's not like he's going to fight for a title here. He's got a good record, 17-7. He's 39 actually. Wow, I gave him too much credit, but he's coming off a win. How many fighters come off wins and retire? It's very rare. So all the power to him as well. Cowboy Fight Pick says, Alan, thanks for the memories. Yeah, he had some great fights. There's a couple that stand out. I remember the Mike Perry fight was very good that he had. How about the Matt Dwyer fight a couple of years ago in 2015? That was awesome. He had the knockout win over Seth Baczynski a couple of years ago. Yeah, just super entertaining. And one of those guys that got into the UFC a little bit later in terms of, him getting signed. So he was always going to be sort of a bit of an older fighter there in terms of the roster. Dino in the chat says UFC card prices are crazy with the new panties cards. Yeah, I saw that actually. Who was I talking to the other day? Tanner Bozer saw his card was there. So we'll be keeping an eye on the prices. I know Dino is one of the guys you got to keep an eye on. He's always up on that stuff. I used to collect trading cards when I was younger as well. So it's kind of neat to see that the UFC is bringing that up to the forefront as well. What else do we got here as far as other news going on here? A couple other fight announcements. Yeah, we got a couple interesting fight matchups there. They just announced today that Alexander Pantoja will be taking on Brandon Royval on August 21st. Love that fight in the flyweight division. Of course, Royval hurting his shoulder in that fight with Brendan Moreno. I think it was Moreno, right? That was who he lost to in his last fight. Good to see him back. Moreno had a monster 2020. Minus the way it ended with the shoulder issue. I think he separated his shoulder. Yeah, it was the Brandon Royval fight was at UFC 255 last November. So yeah, unfortunately what happened to Brandon Moreno, but good to see him get rebooked and good to see him get a highly ranked opponent, because if he wins that, he'll be right back in the saddle in terms of what we saw him do here. So I think we may have lost Jim here, but that's okay. Like I said, we'll be taking some questions here as we got, we'll do maybe like another 5 minutes here on the chat. Again, appreciate everyone tuning in here. We do the show every Monday. I was going to say every Tuesday, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8:30 or 8 p.m. Eastern time as well, if you guys are tuning in here. And again, we can take questions ahead of time as well. If you guys want to hit me up on Twitter, @LynchOnSports, always open to talking about fight-related stuff as well. What else do we got? We talked about the Anthony Johnson arrest. We talked about, here's one. John Jones shuts down a Stipe Miocic fight. I don't blame John Jones for shutting it down. It should be Francis or bust. They got to figure out this money thing. Everyone wants to see John Jones and Francis Ngannou. They got to figure it out. They got to come to an agreement. Jones, doesn't have a management group anymore as far as we're hearing. He's parted ways with First Round. Can they get it together? Can they find some common ground here? I hope so. I want to see that fight. I don't want to see him fight Stipe because I want to see Jones fight for the belt. He vacated his light heavyweight title. He shouldn't have to fight someone at heavyweight. He should bypass that and go straight to a title shot. Don't get me wrong. I think Francis Ngannou and Derek Lewis will be a fun fight, but it's not the same as a Jones fight. There's that intrigue of how Jones would do at heavyweight. Can he take a Francis Ngannou shot? Ngannou looked the best he's ever looked in his last fight against Stipe Miocic. So we'll see how John Jones can do there as well. We got another question here from Dino. He says, what do you think will happen with Zhang? Bad, tough loss against Rose Namajunas in her last fight. I think there's a couple different ways you could go. You could do the Ioane and Jacek rematch if you want. I don't think she should get a rematch against Rose. Actually, speaking to Cheyenne Nan over the weekend, who's going to be fighting Carla Esparza in a few weeks, it sounds like Jan has been basically told by the UFC that if she wins this fight or Carla wins that fight, they're going to fight Rose Namajunas next. So I think Zhang is on the outside looking in, and I don't blame it. I mean, some people want to see a rematch. They're like, well, she's the champion. But I think at the same time, I think, we'll talk about the crowd comments in a second here, but I think with Zhang, you only defended the title once. You shouldn't automatically get a rematch because of that. In terms of what the crowd had said, I know there was some talk of some, derogatory terms. My thing though is Zhang does not speak much English. I don't know if like she heard exactly what the crowd said. Either way, I think it more had to do with the fact that Zhang was a foreign fighter fighting an American. And typically, I mean, look, I've been a George St. Pierre fan forever. I remember when George St. Pierre fought BJ Penn or fought, Americans, they were saying USA, USA. So I don't think it's any different in that case. I know she said the crowd upset her, but you know, you got to kind of tune that out. There's fighters that go to Brazil every card and get told they're going to die or we want you to die. How's that any different? I don't see the you know, the difference there. I don't want to get too political here, but that's sort of what I was thinking as well in terms of the comments and all that. So we got some other people talking about this Derek Lewis fight and Francis Ngannou. Will it happen this summer? I could see it happening this summer as well because of the fact that, yeah, I think they're going to move on from John Jones. I think they can't put it together and can't get it done. So that's something to, I think they're going to end up going with that fight. They have to, right? Francis is going to defend his title at some point. So that's something to keep in mind. They probably will move ahead with John Jones and Derek Lewis, even though that's not I mean, we'll watch it. It's a good fight, but it's a rematch. Obviously, Lewis won the first fight. Ngannou is a much different fighter than when they first fought. But am I amped to see, Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou compared to Jones? I'm not. I'd rather see Jones fight as well. Cowboy Fight Picks, the comments are appearing on the screen as well. So if you have any other questions, we can get it in before we wrap things up. Again, we got a couple more minutes here. Looks like we've lost Jim, or Jim hates me, one of the two. No, it's probably not Jim hating me. I'm just giving him a hard time. Jim's busy, though. I'll give him credit for doing the show this week. He's going to be cornering Andrea Lee, like we mentioned. Andrea takes on Antonina Shevchenko on the prelims this Saturday at UFC 262. What else do we got going on here? What about Amanda? And what about Amanda? Dino's asking, you mean Amanda Nunes? Are you talking about the Juliana Pena fight that's coming up here in a few months? We will see here. Oh, who do we want to see as our next guest? Great question. You can also leave that in the comments as well. We always check the comments here. If there's a guest you want on the show, we're always open to bringing on different guests every single week here on the Victory Loves Company podcast. On top of that, let's see. We're just plugging away here on the show. What else we got? Yeah, we got UFC this weekend. We're going to have, there's no PFL this week. There's no PFL till June 10th, so a bit of a break there. Bellator's not back until, I think, the 21st. Bellator 259. That's actually a pretty interesting card coming up here in a little bit. Chris Cyborg's on the card, my co-host of my podcast I do with her every week. So she'll be fighting Leslie Smith in a rematch. You also got Fabian Edwards, Leon Edwards' brother, in the co-main event, taking on Austin Vanderford. I think that's a co-main event. They haven't announced it yet. You got Darian Caldwell on the card. A lot of good fights. Valerie Lareda is back as well. Janae Harding. A lot of interesting matchups there as well. Max Holloway, good to hear from you. Max, who do you got as a lock pick on Saturday? Someone was asking me about like my lock picks this weekend for the card. If I pick a lock, I am even a little reluctant to say it as a lock, but I think Caitlin Chukagian probably wins her fight. Araujo's pretty solid, but Chukagian's very solid and gets it done. I'm looking at some of these other matchups, see a lot of 50-50 fights. I don't see any that are necessarily like a lock per se, right? Like even Ferguson Dariush. Ferguson's a good turn back the clock this weekend and looked really great. Oliveira Chandler's a coin flip. Even a fight like Jamie Pickett and Jordan Wright that's on the prelims, I don't think there's a clear-cut winner there. I think that's a 50-50 fight as well. But should be a good card on Saturday night as well. Let's get a couple more questions in here. We got about 3 minutes left. Appreciate everyone tuning in and appreciate you guys bearing with me here with my co-host, losing his connection here, but it's all good. What else do we got in terms of other topics that are going on? Like I mentioned, a couple fight announcements as well. We didn't even talk last week about Sergio Pettis winning the bantamweight title in Bellator. Good for him. I mean, this is a guy that, for years was sort of living in the shadow of his brother, goes over to Bellator, makes his own, his own path. And I know a lot of people, including myself, who didn't think he was going to beat Juan Archuleta, but he did. And he had a good game plan. And I think it's great to see Sergio Pettis get the win and win the bantamweight title for Bellator. I think he's someone they can definitely market and use going forward for their bantamweight division. But there's a lot of good talent there. You've got, the Russian kid, the Tiger, Magomed, you got him as well. You've got Patchy Mix. You've got Rafael Stotts, his teammate. There's a lot of good options there for the Bellator bantamweight division as well. Dino saying that Jim was kidnapped by aliens. It might have happened. I'll have to check in with Jim and see if anything bad happened there as well. Let's see. Canelo. Yeah, the Canelo win on the weekend was really good as well. I love the fact that Canelo is speaking more English now. He's like a huge star in boxing, but I don't think he's really translated a lot to the North American fans. But to hear him do interviews in English, I thought was really cool over the weekend. So that was awesome as well. Let's see who else we have here. Max Holloway. I'm going to skip the Genie's question because you said my last name wrong. I'm not going to put that on the screen. But Max Holloway says, do you think Fabian Sanchez are so self-aware they can't see themselves from an outside perspective? I would tend to think that. Look, they've been nothing but nice to me, but there is some weird stuff going on there. And you just hope they can come to some resolution here and they can, find some peace here, because there's a lot of negativity there with everything that sort of happened there with that entire situation as well too. So there we go. Good time to wrap up the show. Want to give a big shout out to my producer Amanda, who makes all this happen every single week. She books all the guests and doing a great job stick handling. That's a hockey term through this show. Well, Jim was out as well. So I appreciate all of you for tuning in here. We will probably have a guest here next week, but make sure you tune in here. Subscribe to the channel. We do the show every single week, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time. The Victory Loves Company podcast with myself and Jim West. In terms of what I got going on this week, like I mentioned, I got the live stream on Saturday. Also got my weekly MMA Q&A. So if there's some questions you didn't get answered here today, join me here on my Lynch MMA YouTube channel. You can just Google Lynch MMA, all one word. You can find my Q&A every single week, every Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, 8 a.m. Pacific time, for myself, Jim West, and the great Amanda England, who produces this show behind the scenes. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Make sure you tune in on Thursday and then on Saturday again for me. And then make sure you come back here a week from today on Tuesday for another episode of Victory Loves Company. I'm James Lynch, signing off. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.